Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the host, Craig Eason.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back. And we are going into the second half of these Blue Talk interviews now. And we're going to look a little bit more closely at what's happening here in the Nordic region and in Norway. And it gives me great pleasure now to introduce the Deputy CEO of Norled, because I think a lot of people will be aware of what Norled is doing. It's driving a lot of this electrification of short sea shipping, but it's going one step further now with the evolution of hydrogen power in their ferries. So it gives me great pleasure to quickly introduce Lars Jacob Engelsen from Norled, who's going to give a quick outline of what Norled's up to.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation. Can you hear me? Yes, good. Okay, just a brief introduction. Norled is one of the major car ferry companies in Norway. It's also the major express boat company and one of the major express boat companies in the world. It's one of the eldest among the major companies in Norway, dating back to 1855, and it has been innovation driven right from the start. Leading up to this, which is the first zero-emission RoPax ferry in the world. This ferry was introduced in 2015. It was not an initial success, but it is today an undisputable success. This graph indicates actual production as percentage of planned production. It's a key performance indicator of operational performance. And basically what you see is that this ferry, which is totally emission-free, has the same level of operative performance as any conventional ferry. Now, admittedly, that was not the case in the start. We had quite a steep learning curve. But that's just a natural part of the process. Because if you do something as complicated as this for the first time in the world, there is a lot of on-site adjustment that needs to be put into place. Also, let me be totally honest. We slightly under-dimensioned the battery packages. This is why you see the dip in the first 2 winters. But now all of this has been straightened out, and we have the same performance as any conventional ferries. Now, that has turned the industry upside down, because by 2022, this ferry will be accompanied by 72 Seablinks, turning almost 35% of the 200 Norwegian ferries absolutely green. Because these ferries being built, they will be built as hybrid electric ferries. And once you have in place electricity, you have every incentive to run on electricity as much of the time as possible. So this is a zero-emission solution for the shorter part, or the short ferry crossings in Norway, which account for somewhere in between 50 and 80 of the 127 ferry crossings in Norway. This has been good for the reputation of Norled and the industry, but it has also been financially good. After turning to a progressive green strategy, the revenue in Norled has increased by 40%. The EBT has increased by more than 1,200%, giving a sharp rise in shareholder value. So green is good also for the ballot. Now, what's next? What's next is we need to solve the longer distance crossings. And that will be done by introducing what will probably be the first, or at least one of the first, hydrogen ferries in the world. This one is being built now, and it will be put into operation in March of 2021. Now, our aim is to make this the second icon for the green shift in the ferry industry. So, the broad picture, what's going on in the industry. The shorter ferry crossings has been solved now, or is being solved by electricity. Now that technology is being downscaled so that we can also solve shorter express boat crossing, typically intra-city express boat crossings. Now, the growth in the world will tend to come in the big cities. These cities all tends to have the same couple of problems: traffic jam, high prices of dwellings. Now, putting in place solution where you transport people on water is a fast and flexible solution to this problem. That's well known. But the novelty factor now, the new element, is that now this can be solved in a zero-emission manner because we don't scale the technology from MF Ampere. And this is not something that might possibly happen in the future. This is going on now. This was number 2 for the tender in Copenhagen. This boat has been built. It has been put into operation on Haugesund Røver in Norway. During this year, we electrify, make totally zero emission, the Aker Brygge Nesodden crossing in Norway. The same will be the instance in Bergen in 2022, and the express boat routes in Oslo, possibly from 2024. This is happening. This ferry, as I told you, is being built. Now, what we like to do then is to downscale the hydrogen technology so that it can be applied in an express boat, in a long-distance express boat. And we are exploring this possibility now with the aid of the Norwegian government. If this is a success, and it still is if, let me be totally honest about that, but if that is a success, it means that the entire ferry and express boat industry will be turned from very grey to very green. And it also means that we have a solution that can be applicable in the express boat industry internationally, which is a far much bigger industry than the ferry industry. And this will be almost like a plane on the water, maybe replacing shorter plane routes by a zero-emission technology. Also, this ferry will be able to run 21 days on one tank filled with hydrogen, which means that this technology, when proven, will have impact in other parts of the shipping sector. That could be to the oil rig in the North Sea, it could be certain solutions for container feeding, and so forth. So basically, what has happened? We have turned an entire industry, or rather 2 industries, upside down, from very grey to very green. And at the same time, we have provided solutions that are also applicable in other parts of the shipping industry. This is the goal, and that is not a 50% reduction by 2050. It's a 75 to 80% reduction by 2030. And we believe this will happen. So that was the story about Norled, and it's a story of hope. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I like the idea that one of the future fast ferries actually looks like something from Star Trek. That's going to, if you make it look cool, it's going to buy. It's got to work. When you're looking at how electrification of, you mentioned the costs and that. What is the cost per electricity per normal conventional fuel, like low sulfur fuel? Because you still got to pay. It's not like if you're going to use batteries, you still got to charge the batteries. So how do you compare the costs of the electricity to the costs of the of conventional fuel?
Okay. There are actually huge savings in fuel costs. And then, of course, the percentage of saving depends on what is the current price level of electricity and what is the current price level of oil. But let me indicate that there is more than a 60% savings in fuel costs. And this is why we believe it is the case that, in part, the long overdue renewal of the Norwegian Ferry fleet was actually partly financed by the savings in fuel costs. So this has been an excellent undertaking for the environment, but it has also been really good for the PTAs and for the customers now having new ferries in place.
So are you able to then say, that, okay, the cost, there's an economic, you're proving a sort of economic benefit as well as an environmental benefit of...
Absolutely, absolutely.
And are you able then to turn that around to the paying customers and say, well, look, here's a green ticket to take this ferry and it's 10% cheaper?
Well, in Norway, the ferries are financed by the PTAs, so the ticket that the customers end up with via the PTAs has been, in our view, smaller due to this improvement. So the answer is yes, but the answer is slightly more complicated.
Yeah. But when we're looking at this move now into a hydrogen society, and there's a lot of efforts being made in different industries as well. There's the Hydrogen Council that was formed a couple of years ago from the World Economic Foundation that's pushing the idea of hydrogen in a number of different societies. As you build these hydrogen vessels, do you find that you need to look at the infrastructure arrangements and how and where else hydrogen is going to be used?
Yes. We believe it should be a political target to put in place a value chain for the production and distribution of liquid hydrogen in Norway. And we believe that volumes coming out of the ferry industry and the express boat industry would be a key factor for putting such a value chain in place. So that's one of the reasons why the hydrogen ferry also in a way is an icon. It plays a vital role in the transition from a grey to a green economy.
And 21 days, that was for the high-speed vessel, was it?
That is for the hydrogen ferry.
The hydrogen ferry?
Yes.
21 days without having to refuel, which gives it... How do you see that having, if you take that story and take it into the more commercial shipping world, or even sort of the world where you see RoPax vessels, ro-ro vessels operating out of Norway down to Denmark, Sweden to Denmark, in the Baltic, other regions like that, even the Mediterranean. What would you say is the likely development that we're going to see? How big can these hydrogen vessels get, and how quickly could we see this hydrogen short sea shipping environment emerge?
Yeah. We would like to say that it's reasonable to believe that this will have impact in other parts of the shipping sector. And then I will leave it to experts within the other sectors to give a specific answer to your question. But with the range of this ferry, we believe it's reasonably fair to assume that the technology will be applicable and could possibly be a game changer also in adjacent sectors in the ferry, in the shipping industry.
Yeah. And do you see the cost? What's the cost comparison of hydrogen with fuel when you're looking at this vessel that's going to come onto the market and operate in 2021? What's the cost of the hydrogen?
Yeah, we always get that question, and then being a commercial company in a competitive situation, we do not like to give too specific answers to that questions.
But and obviously you've got a model where you think it's going to actually make sense. But are you looking at how the hydrogen is going to be supplied? Going back to that question about the infrastructure and the other uses of hydrogen in society, that it'll be beneficial for you to see hydrogen in use around the Norwegian coast for other uses, which will help the supply chain.
I think the case is that the applicability of hydrogen and the attractiveness of hydrogen is very much dependent on what kind of value chain we can get in place for totally green hydrogen. And given the amount of hydropower in Norway, we have a very good starting point for establishing that kind of value chain. But like with the battery ferry and like with the hydrogen ferry, it needs a collective effort and it needs a certain political will to get this into place. Yeah.
Just to sort of clarify, the way that things are structured in Norway is it's the road administrations that stipulate what kind of vessels they want around their jurisdictions, isn't it? So they put a tender out and Norled says, right, you want that kind of vessel, we can deliver it, and you tender for that kind of thing with your competitors in Norway that are pushing that. That in itself is a fairly unique way for Norway, because you've got the local councils effectively saying, to get this ferry route, you've got to do this. So that gives you the incentive to go and do that. But then you've got organisations like Enova, government-funded bodies that then say, right, okay, you're going to achieve this goal. They help you to achieve that goal. So you've got a very rounded process in Norway then, I suppose, to help you achieve the environmental goals that the country's trying to aim for.
Yeah, but if you look at the Norwegian ferry market, first, the tender process is very well known in most economies, at least most Western economies. But it's not applied in the ferry sector in all nations yet. And I say yet because if you look at the Norwegian ferry market, when it comes to customer satisfaction, when it comes to operational efficiency, when it comes to cost efficiency, and also when it comes to innovation, we are the #1 market in the world. So I believe the tender instrument could and should be used in more markets than the Norwegian market, and I believe that will also be the case in the future.
Are you fairly optimistic about how the experiences that you've demonstrated at Norled will actually be instrumental in other countries? Have you got other countries showing strong interest in this Norwegian model?
There has been an immense interest in the battery ferry, and then there has been an enormous interest in the hydrogen ferry. So, and also what we're doing on the express boat side is attracting quite a lot of attention. Yeah. So, and we believe the reason why this is so is that this technology is applicable many places in the world, and it's a really important part of the solution to the climate problem.
Good. Lars Jacob, thank you very much.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.